Rudramarutastunbanti Dibbaistabair Vedaisangopakramopanishadair Gayanti Jang Samoga Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Jang Yoginaha Yasyantangana Vidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namo Namah. Our salutations to that Supreme Being who is one without a second, whom the sages call by various names. Our salutations to Him whose glory has been sung through the rapturous hymns of the scriptures of the world, but whose limitless and infinite glory none can comprehend. But again, whom the sages and devotees realize within their hearts, in their deepest contemplation. Him we salute again and again. May He shine in our hearts, manifest therein all His glory, and dispel all darkness and ignorance. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. I shall try to explain this morning the Beatitudes. The central note of the Beatitudes, as well as of the Sermon on the Mount, has been stated in one sentence. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. To see God, to realize our oneness with Him. That is the one central theme in every religion. And that is the one purpose of human life and living. I remember a young boy who became a disciple of Ramakrishna. He was trying to find out what is the purpose of life and living. And he said to me that it gave him a thrill when he read a passage from the seer philosopher Shankara, who said, a man is born not to desire life in the world of senses, but to realize and enjoy the bliss of an illumined soul. Again, in the teachings of Shankara, we read how he said, what need of the study of scriptures if Brahman is not known? That is, there is no need for scriptures, there is no need for religion if God cannot be known. In other words, to see God, to know God, that is the meaning not only of the spirit of religions, but that is the meaning of life. And in this age, Sri Ramakrishna emphasized this truth. To see God, to realize Him. My master once told me, first seek and find that ocean of bliss. And Christ was very definite, and He meant it literally when He said, "For they shall see God." One thing I have learned in my life, sitting at the blessed feet of God-men, men and women who talked with God, every moment of whose life was guided by the will of God. I had that blessed fortune to sit at the feet of such people. And what did I learn? They did not teach any theology. They did not teach us any philosophy. Simply this we learned, that God is our very own. He is the soul of our souls. And He can be known and realized. My master used to make us feel that it is so easy to know Him, just like as it were when you have the fruit in the palm of your hand, you can get it. And Christ, He was a God-man. He was a divine incarnation, Son of God, one with God. And in His association, in His presence, these disciples, they knew, they realized, they felt that to realize God is the one purpose of life. Do you not remember how when multitudes that followed Jesus and they left Him, only these few disciples were by Him, and He looked at them and said, "Are ye also going to leave me?" Then St. Peter said, "Master, Thou hast the words of eternal life." You see, so these disciples realized that eternal life, that is in God, in seeing God, in knowing God. Now, what is the main principle or the method by which we can see God? And that also is beautifully expressed by Christ when He said, "Blessed are the pure in heart." Now, what does this pure in heart mean? It's a little difficult to understand, because we may think to observe ethical and moral virtues, which are important. That's the foundation of spiritual life, but that's not enough. That's not what is meant here by pure in heart. Something greater, something more. For instance, you may see and meet many people who are good, ethical. They have moral virtues, but yet they do not see God. So what does it mean? Now, in the words of Jesus, I'd say, the light, He said, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. You see, this is the purity of heart. When thine eye be single. What does it exactly mean? You can very easily understand if you experiment with religion. You know, religion is not in the study of scriptures, not in hearing a sermon. But religion is something more. Now, before I come to that again, let me point out that it is something that is transmitted by the guru, by the teacher, by the man of God. It was something that was transmitted by Christ to his disciples. I'll come to that again later. But as I was saying, religion is something experimental. And what is to experiment with? With your own consciousness, with your own mind. Now try to think of God. That is the main principle of religion. To surrender ourselves to God, to devote ourselves to Him, to take our refuge in Him completely and wholeheartedly. That is the principle of religion. Now try that. And what do you find? You have so many distractions arising. You see, what is it that is obstructing our vision of God? It's our mind, restlessness of the mind. The moment you try to focus your thought upon God, you find so many distractions arising. Because your eye is not single. You have not yet had that understanding and conviction that He is the treasure of life. In Him alone is to be found happiness and freedom. And of course, in spite of that, even to the discriminating soul, distractions arise. Because we have put so many thoughts in our mind, the impressions of so many deeds in our mind are there. And the moment you try to calm yourself, they come out. You see, those who have tried to meditate will have realized this, that perhaps they were better off before they learned to meditate. They're not as bad as they feel they are now, because all that you have poured into your mind, which is remaining dormant in the subconscious mind, they begin to come out the moment you try to calm yourself. Now then again, what is there to do? And I often give the illustration of inkwell, and which you cannot empty by throwing out the ink. But you have to clear that ink out. So what you do? Pour water. Clear water. The ink oozes out. It continues to ooze out for a little while, for some time. Then you get the clear water inside. And that is the principle. And so in the Gita we read, whosoever works for me alone. You see, your whole life is to be readjusted, reoriented. Because as St. Paul pointed out, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The mind has to be renewed completely, transformed completely. You see, this mind which is full of those impressions and impurities, they have to be cleaned out. And so your whole way of life has to be changed. Not by running away anywhere, but live where you are. Do what you are doing, but at the same time, change your whole attitude towards life. And so in the Gita it is taught, whosoever works for me alone, whatever you do, you are doing it for God. You are doing it as worship of God. Makes me his only goal and is devoted to me, free from attachment and without hatred toward any creature, that man, O Prince, shall enter into me. Now let me read out from the Bible. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying. Now just mark here. Seeing the multitudes, he wanted to avoid them. He went into the mountains. And then a few disciples gathered around him. And then he opened his mouth. You know, when I first joined the monastery, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he told me, you know, the elephant has two sets of teeth, the tusk and the teeth. The tusk to protect himself against enemies, and the teeth to chew his own food. Similarly, the great teachers, the illumined teachers, they have, as it were, two sets of teachings. One for the multitude, another for the intimate ones, those who are really earnest, seeking souls. Now, in this connection again, let me tell you something. It is not that these teachings which are given to the intimate disciples, one cannot find, one cannot read, because they are all in scriptures, they are all written down. But it is not that merely, because I can tell you from my own experience. One time, my master began to talk. And then all the monks of the order gathered around him. And he went on speaking for 3 hours. And then he was informed a visitor is coming to see him. And then he says suddenly, now my mind comes down. I can't speak anymore. You see, it is not that those teachings are not to be found. But you see, as he was talking to us, the atmosphere was created in such a way that it was vibrating. He was giving something. You see, he was giving something. He was transmitting something. You know, that reminds me. And Swami Vivekananda used to speak to the American audience sometimes. In the audience, some would go into ecstatic experiences. And he said, religion or lecturing is not mere words, but you have to give something. And that's what these great ones can do. And naturally, you see, who can again accept? You have to be ready for it. You know, there is a saying in the Upanishads, wonderful must be the teacher and wonderful must be the disciple. Now, and as he opened his mouth, what did he say? The opening sentence, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And he knew that these disciples that gathered around him are poor in spirit. You see, unless you are poor in spirit, I shall explain to you presently what it means. This truth cannot be transmitted. What does it mean? You have to be humble. You see, if you approach with your pride of learning, your wealth, or your prestige in life, no. You have to approach with humility. You know, the water gathers in low place. You pour water on a high hill, it goes down. In the Gita we read this verse. These illumined souls who have realized the truth will instruct you in the knowledge of Brahman if you will prostrate yourself before them, question them, and serve them as disciples. You see, that is the point to remember. You know, I'm reminded of a story which perhaps I've told you many times. You see, a disciple who wanted to be a disciple first approached a teacher. And the teacher realized that he's not yet ready. So he said, now, I don't think you can do what I ask you to do in order to be a disciple. Then this disciple says, now, what is it am I to do? Oh, you have to work hard. You have to cook, gather fuel, keep house, take care of guests, and you have to be busy. Hard work. And then he says, but what does the guru do? Well, the guru sits quietly and gives out teachings. Then he says, why not make me a guru? You see, how many are ready for this discipleship? One time my master said to me, you know, how many are ready to accept the treasure that we have to offer? Generally, people come and they want to buy potatoes, onions, and eggplants. You see, because they don't realize, they don't understand where lies the treasure and what is the greatest treasure in life. Now again, you approach the teacher with humility, you serve the teacher, and then he can transmit to you. But, you know, in the Beatitudes you find the methods and ways also. Now then he says, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Now here this idea, this word mourning or mourn, it occurred to me this way. You see, it has two kinds of meanings, the word mourn. You see, one is, for loss of something we mourn. Also, we want something that we can't get, we mourn. Now here, of course, mourning, not for the loss of anything else, not mourning for something of the material world that we cannot get, but mourning for the loss of the kingdom of heaven. You see, as in the Bible you read, God made man in his own image, in that perfection. And it seems we have lost it. And we must grieve for it. In other words, we must feel that our life has no meaning unless we have the kingdom of God. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, men weep rivers of tears because a son is not born or because they cannot get riches, but who sheds even a single teardrop because he has not been fortunate enough to see the Lord. Now when this morning comes again, then there comes a great hunger, a raging hunger, and a burning thirst, as Ramakrishna used to say. And that has to come. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now this righteousness, of course, does not mean in the sense of moral virtues. Because in the Bible you read how when somebody said to Christ that he was good, he says, why call me good? God alone is good. Goodness itself, righteousness itself, that's God. So blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Whenever anybody would ask Sri Ramakrishna, what is the way? And his one answer was, yearn for him with a longing heart. Now, of course, this yearning does not come all on a sudden. As soon as you get interested in spiritual life, or as you are practicing the spiritual disciplines, you have not yet got that yearning. Just a slight desire has come into you. But as you go on practicing these spiritual disciplines, there comes a moment in your life when you feel that you cannot live without God. You have that raging hunger and burning thirst for God. And that very moment, you become filled. God becomes revealed to you. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. This is rather difficult to understand. But one thing, as you grow spiritually, as you come nearer to God, and then again, when you find the illumined knowledge of God, the one characteristic of such a man is that he becomes humble, meek. In this connection, you see how translations of the scripture sometimes mislead, or you really cannot understand what originally it is meant. There is a passage in the Upanishads describing the illumined soul as he does not talk too much or over talk. That's how Max Muller and Hume, they have all translated the word atibadi. Of course, I couldn't, when I was doing the translation, I couldn't find any meaning to that word. So I tried to find out what the great commentator Shankara has to say about that word. And he explained the meaning. He said, he becomes humble and does not assert himself. That is the characteristic of an illumined soul. There's a beautiful truth in this connection, I'll tell you. Beautiful truth taught by Lao Tse. I'll quote to you. Of the soft and weak things in the world, none is weaker than water. But in overcoming that which is firm and strong, nothing can equal it. That which is soft conquers the hard. Rigidity and hardness are companions of death. Softness and tenderness are companions of life. Now let us try to understand what exactly is meant by inheriting the earth. Because we all know that the meek never inherits the earth, actually. The empires are not built by the meek. Then what does it exactly mean? The great psychologist Patanjali has one aphorism, and it says, the man who is confirmed in non-stealing becomes the master of all riches. Of course, as I have many times explained to you, the meaning of the word non-stealing is to feel that you are not the owner. You do not own anything. That everything belongs to nature. Everything belongs to God, and you are only a trustee. Suppose you own estate, you own money. Good. Nothing wrong in that. But do not identify yourself with that. Do not be possessed by your wealth. And if you are possessed by your wealth, then you are really stealing. So you see, universally we are all thieves from that standpoint. And so Patanjali says, if you practice non-stealing, that is, if you do not feel that you own anything, then it is that you become the master of all riches. Now, how do you become the master of all riches? What does it mean? So the commentator here comes to the rescue and says, when you get something big, suppose a poor man gets millions of dollars suddenly. Of course, he may go crazy. That is true. But there comes a satisfaction. You see, there comes a peculiar satisfaction. Of course, I don't know how it is. But that's what the commentator says. There comes a satisfaction. And that satisfaction, you see, the satisfaction that comes when one finds infinite treasure. In other words, you don't feel any lack of anything. And here is a peculiar thing, in India, the monks are called, are addressed as Maharaj, as respectful term. For instance, so and so Maharaj. So every Swami is a Maharaj. And so a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he said, you see, they call us Maharaj. Maharaj means king or emperor. And we do not own an inch of land, and they call us Maharajas. You see? Because they have the satisfaction of having the infinite treasure. Then blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Now in this connection, I'll quote to you the yoga aphorism again. Undisturbed calmness of the mind is attained by cultivating friendliness toward the happy, mercy and compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and indifference toward the wicked. Now mark these words. They are wonderful truth. Cultivating friendliness toward the happy. You see, generally envy or jealousy arises in the mind if somebody else is happy. So cultivate friendliness. Be happy with the happy. Mercy and compassion for the unhappy. You see, sometimes one feels good. You know. That man deserved it. You see. So that's not a good characteristic. We have a saying that a very wicked man only strikes somebody who is down and out. A very wicked man. So what should be there? Mercy and compassion. And delight in the virtuous. And indifference toward the wicked. Now, what is the result? Undisturbed calmness of the mind. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. In the Bhagavatam, the wisdom of God, we read a verse. He in whose heart God has become manifested brings peace and cheer and delight everywhere he goes. You see, they are the mercy. They are the peacemakers. They bring peace. And these are the children of God. Now, I shall give you concrete example. When we first joined the monastery, we are about 24 of us together, young men. And, naturally, youth and spirited and they fought and quarreled also. You see, as soon as you join a monastery, you don't become a saint, you see. And so two boys quarreled and came to blows. And one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, he comes to complain to Swami Brahmananda, who was the president. He was my master, and I was seated by him, so I know the whole story. This Swami comes and tells Maharaj, look, you know how much love and affection we have had for one another, but these boys, they came to blows, and we cannot allow such nonsense in the monastery. You just ask them to get out of here. Then Maharaj says, but brother, they have come to you. Do something for them. Transform their lives. And then this one says, you are right, Maharaj. And so he goes out and calls all the Swamis and Brahmacharis and all the monks and comes in a procession. And the Swami comes and with folded palms says, Maharaj, you have to transform the lives of all this. Now you go and prostrate before him one by one. And so we all bowed down before him one by one. And he placed his hand like that over the head. And I can tell you my own experience. It was as if the body, in a hot day, burning, and you are having a cool, soothing shower. That was how I could express that. And of course, all that differences and misunderstandings went away from everybody. A similar case, in a rather worse way, happened in another institution, in one of the largest Ramakrishna mission institution in Benares. There formed two groups of people, two groups of boys, and they were tearing one another. And so the general secretary went there and he found out who is at the root of all this trouble, and he found out two or three of the boys were at the root of all this trouble. So he wrote to Maharaj that this is what I have found out and let me know what we should do. And Maharaj said, don't do anything, I am coming there. So he came. He didn't go into anything at all. Who caused this trouble or who did what? He didn't inquire at all. He didn't mention it. All he said was, all of you must come and meditate with me every morning at 4 o'clock. And so they all came and would sit and meditate with him. And this went on for a month. Everything became peaceful. There's no trouble anymore. Then he went away. You see, that's how they make peace. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. You know, the people of the world, that is those who are steeped in worldliness, they cannot appreciate holy people. And then furthermore, the natural tendency of human mind is to believe in the worst of people. And so you will find always they talk against and they revile holy people. Now, what should be the attitude of a spiritual aspirant? The attitude is taught by Christ when he said, when he was crucified, just think, what did he do? Did he do any harm? And he was crucified. Now this reminds me of another very funny saying of a great philanthropist of India, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. He was a well-known philanthropist. He always did good to people. He earned plenty money and he gave away his money in charity and for the good of people. And then one day he was told that so-and-so was speaking ill of him. And then he tried to remember. He said, but I can't remember. I don't believe I ever did any good to that man. And why should he be speaking ill of me? You see? Now, what did Christ teach? When he was crucified, he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. In this connection again, I'll tell you an incident from the life of Ramakrishna. There was another priest in the temple where he was living, and this priest became very envious of Ramakrishna because Mathur Babu, who was the owner of that estate and that temple, was always good to Ramakrishna and had great reverence and respect for him. And he was doing everything for him. And so this priest got jealous and he thought to himself, now Ramakrishna, he looks such a simple fellow, and why does Mathur show such respect to him? He knows some magical formula. So he has hypnotized Mathur and does some magic to him. And so he comes to Ramakrishna and says, "Hello, could you teach me that mystery, that magic by which you have controlled Mathur?" And Ramakrishna says, "I don't know any magic. I don't know anything. I don't have hypnotized people or anything." But he did not believe it. Then, when he found Ramakrishna one day alone and there was nobody around, and Ramakrishna was in ecstasy, he went to the room and kicked and kicked and kicked him until he fell down and blood began to come out from his mouth. And then, of course, Ramakrishna became all right later, and he never mentioned that to anybody. And then something happened later, and this priest was discharged for some other fault. And then Sri Ramakrishna told Mathur Babu, "Do you know that man did this to me?" Then Mathur said, "But why did you not tell me, Father? I'd have just cut off his head." And Ramakrishna said, "That's why I didn't tell you." And then furthermore, he said that, I can't blame that man. I am to be blamed because I could not convince him that I was telling the truth. So he was sincere. He didn't believe me. And that's why he punished me. And so I can't blame him. It is my fault. Now in the Bhagavatam again, in the Song of the Mendicant, there's a beautiful verse or teaching. You see, this mendicant went to a village and the boys tortured him. And so, this is what he said. "Even if thou dost think another person is causing thee happiness or misery, thou art really neither happy nor wretched, for thou art the Atman, the changeless spirit. Thy sense of happiness and misery is due to a false identification of thyself with the body, which alone is subject to changes. The self is the real self in all. With whom shouldst thou be angry for causing pain if accidentally thou dost bite thy tongue with thy teeth?" You see, they feel that oneness with everybody, no matter what they do to him. And so it is just like that. Why should you be angry for causing pain if accidentally thou dost bite thy tongue with thy teeth? Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrittor Ma Amritangamaya. Abir Maidhi. Rudrajakte Dakshinang Mukhang. Te Namang Pahi Nityam. Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from death to immortality. Lead us from darkness to light. Light us through and through, and guide us evermore with thy loving presence. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace